Hi, I'm Adam Meyer of Mill City Lutherie in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we've got a really special one today. We have a 1957 Les Paul Goldtop. You can check that out. This is all in very good condition, almost completely original. We're going to find out a couple things when we get our way into this, what's original or not. The frets are way worn down. I'm going to know that once I start heating them up and pulling them out. I'll be able to smell what type of glue is used. If it's super glue, which is kind of modern glue, came around about after this guitar was made, I'll probably follow through and use that again. It has a very distinct smell. It's almost kind of a sharp chemical, kind of sour smelling. If it's a sweet smell, then it was probably hide glue, which Gibson may or may not have done that, but at this era of guitar, I may end up just using some hide glue to hold the frets back in place. The glue doesn't actually bond the metal frets to the wood. What it does is it kind of fills in any gaps, and when you pull the fret out, the wood kind of gets pulled apart a little bit. The glue kind of seeps back in between the wood there, and you get it all glued back together. So I'm going to replace the nut and bridge at the same time. You're going to follow through as carefully as possible on this, and let's get this project underway. Let's get a close look at this. We're replacing the nut with bone, as discussing with the customer. It's common to replace nuts, so it's not a big deal to be replacing that. Heavy fret wear. The bridge will also be replaced. Two pneumatic bridges, all you do is just slack the strings, take it off, put the original back on, so replacing that isn't a big deal. We've got some heavily checked gold finish here. This is quite the beauty. Take a look here with the strings off. You can see these frets are heavily worn. There's also pitting in the fingerboard, but I'm not going to level that away. That is just how it's supposed to look. You don't go in and start leveling things trying to make it look like it's brand new. I'm going to get the frets off and double check the fingerboard for any high and low areas, but really all I'll probably do is just kind of lightly clean across the top to try and create a good surface for the frets to rest on. So we're going to evaluate the radius of this neck. Generally speaking, Gibsons have a 12-inch radius. That is the curvature of the fingerboard. Generally, there are variations. Now, this guitar is really old. The plastic shrinks differently than the wood. We also have wood that has been worn away from playing. What is most important is where the frets are going to sit, the slot. The little bit of wood on either side of that slot, that is what's important. We don't care about any wood that's been worn away in between. So I'm going to show you here. Get out my radius gauge and turn it to the 10. Got a backlight here. You can see here between the 11th and 12th fret, we've got a big gap right in the middle. But kind of show a few different ones of these. Got the same thing, but if I bring it up right where fret slot is, that's a pretty good 10-inch radius there. So that's what's important. So I'm going to evaluate up and down the neck where the frets sit. I'm going to come up here higher up on the neck where it meets the body. You can see that there's a little bit of a lump over in this area. So I may just leave that because that's not really an area where anybody plays all too often. So and the idea is if I were to sand any of this, once I hit that plastic inlay, I can't, it gets really hard to hide that any work's been done on this. Sanding the wood, I can treat the wood and have it look like it's like nothing's been done. But considering the area of the neck and the kind of the repercussions of me doing anything to that, I think it's better that I just leave that as it is. Nobody's going to be playing up there. I'll still follow through with the fret dress. Really what would happen is I get the frets pressed in, and then I go over and I level the frets. They're 10-inch radius on top. It's such a minor discrepancy here. Now I'll show with the 12-inch, you know, that's obviously not what this guitar is going to be anymore. I would have to do a big fingerboard leveling to get that corrected back to a 12-inch. You know, if it started out as a 12-inch. And the customer would not be happy if I did that. The only time you do that is if the neck is really screwed up. As you can see here, we have the truss rod all the way loose. I put some lube on the threads of the truss rod so it adjusts nice and easy. So let's see what kind of change we have here. I'll bring it all the way tight. And we have some nice back bow to the neck. So this is working really well. And the thing that's important, and I've probably said it a bunch of times in this video, where the fret slots are. Where the frets are going to rest on this fingerboard, that's what's important. I'll loosen this a little bit, try and find where it's level. That is pretty darn good. Look at here on the treble side. Again, that's really good. Bass side, we've got a little bit of a hump right here. And that is not where the inlays are. Now the important thing here to remember is you're looking at this and you're seeing all these gaps between the fret slots. That's fine. I am not going to try and get that perfectly flat. If this was like a 5-year-old guitar, 20-year-old guitar, do whatever you like. I'm not about to go in and try and take these, you know, wear spots out of the fingerboard because, well, first of all, you just don't do that. This is an old guitar. You alter it as little as possible. But just imagine where these side dots already are. If I tried to level down to where in between everything was leveled out, I'd be taking it down where they would obviously be off center. Got the frets out. Came out nice and clean. See, there's no chipping. It's going real well. Now, one thing with old guitars like this Gibson here is these inlays are plastic and they shrink different than the wood. it'll shrink at a different rate. Every now and then you'll have a corner that comes loose and sticks up. Now would be the time to get some glue in there and press it down. The issue with that is then you have to clean up after yourself, and it's hard to kind of mask that you were doing any work on this. So we lucked out where these are all nice and solid. One thing like right here, I don't think I can really show that. The wood is actually lower than the edge of the inlay, so you can actually run your finger across that and feel it, but the inlay isn't loose. So I'm just going to leave that alone. So I've got the fingerboard all cleaned off. I just steel wooled it real nicely, vacuumed it well. What I'm going to do next is clean out the fret slots. I have like a fret slotting saw that fits in between the binding. I can clear out any glue that's in there. Then I've got a little kind of a claw type tool to help clean out any debris in there. After that, I have a little triangle file. These I get at a local surplus store over in St. Paul. These aren't actually from a luthier supplier. This is one of those things where I found and I end up liking it a lot better because it's dull. The danger with this, or why I'm choosing to use it on this guitar, this is a Brazilian rosewood fingerboard. The last thing I want to be doing is when I'm taking my little file to go across the grain, I end up catching and breaking off chips of rosewood. So I find that this little dull file, even though I have to sit there and file a little bit more than normal, I prefer to use this. It's just one of those little things that you kind of discover over time, that sometimes the real sharp file isn't the choice for this situation. I'm also not going to do any leveling on the fingerboard. Just thinking it out, none of these spots are off enough to alter how it plays. Plus I'm putting on tall frets per request of the customer, so any little slight variation, I'll be taking it out with the fret dress, so I really don't have to worry about any lumps in the fingerboard. So I'm going to show you here. I can't do a video where you can smell what I smell, but when I was heating up the frets, it totally smelled like there was hide glue holding the frets in. Rosewood has a sweet smell if you sand on it, but it's like a floral sweet smell. You heat it up, whatever, it has a distinctive smell. So does hide glue, but hide glue has a sweet smell that is, a little more like a sweetness like a candy. Another thing is here, as I'm cleaning out these fret slots, see here, this little bit of dust I'm getting. Oh, it's sticking. Don't force that. That there, that's obviously hide glue. So I'm going to follow through, and when I press these frets in, I'm going to use hide glue to hold them in. I could use whatever I want to do the job, but I don't know. It's just one of those things where I don't want to be the guy that kind of breaks the seal. I don't want to use super glue or anything on such a classic instrument. So I'm going to follow through. This right here, that's your evidence. I'm going to use hide glue. So the thing to remember here is you don't file all the way back and forth. I'm just going to file up close to the binding and stop like that. Come back a little ways. I'm going to follow through all the way up, flip the guitar around, and do the other side, because I don't want to come down like this and end up filing a notch in the binding. It's one of those, it's pretty obvious, don't do that, but it's easy to slip and forget. So for this job, I'm going to be using some special tools. Most often I just hammer frets in, or I'll use my drill press as a kind of a modified fret press. For the neck area, I'll be using, which is basically like a vice grips, but it's got a sliding cradle here and jaw that I can put in the right radius fret. I'm not sure what you would call this, but it's brass insert. It'll help press the fret into place. and I'll be able to let it sit there for a few minutes, get the glue to kind of start setting up, and it'll holds everything nice and steady. Then for over the body, I made my own tool instead of buying one. Really pretty simple. It's I bought this attachment. This is what I put in my drill press instead of buying a separate arbor press. I made a block that attaches to both this to an F clamp, and as you can see, this will turn in the block so I can adjust this and apply pressure. Of course, there will be a padded block on the back of the guitar so the clamp doesn't leave any marks on the back. So to prep a fret to go in a bound fingerboard, we've got this one already cut to length. It's a little bit wider than the fingerboard. This is my fret tang nippers. We'll only cut this. Like I said, if you're looking at it from the edge, it looks like a mushroom. This cuts the stem but leaves the cap. So now I have it trimmed, but the bottom side of the bead has a little bit, it's not flat. There's still a little bit of the tang on there yet. So I have a little fret holder I made here. I just slide it in there. Fret is currently upside down. If you're not able to see that, I'll try and zoom in. And what you do is just file the underside of the bead until it's smooth. So this is the process. I've got fret, the tang trimmed already. See that? It's going to fit between the binding. I'm going to put some glue in, feel for where the barbs want to bite into fresh wood. Then I'm going to tap it in with the mallet to get it started, and then clamp it into place and let it sit for several minutes. I'll clean up the sides in the meantime. So here we go. I've put hide glue into a syringe so I can easily put it into the fret slot. And if you can see here, taking a little pause, I beveled the base side of the frets here. Gained a little bit of width over the fingerboard before the frets only came to the binding. and I gained a little bit. You can see how the fret is now resting on top of the binding. Even though this is so heavily beveled, nibs are long gone, and then somebody also rounded this in. I'm able to get these to fit just right. You can see I've got a nice square surface. They are fit flush. So, successful on the base side. Time for me to do the treble side. So now I got to get ready to do the fret dress on these new frets, and I'm going to make the nut and get it slotted now so I can string it up and put the guitar in my string tension simulator. Now, key things about the nut on this is I'm actually going to use a bleached bone nut, not a unbleached vintage as they're sold. And what I'm doing is I'm going to get this fit well, and then I'm going to do a little bit of finish touch up on the edges and over the top when it's completed. That way it'll blend in and it'll look like, you know, the nut was on there since the 1950s. So some key points about making a nut. I already sanded it a little bit to fit into the nut slot. You only remove glue when you're cleaning out the nut slot, nut shelf, whatever you want to call it here. You do not want the nut to rock this way at all. You want it to be nice and flat. You do not want it to be wobbling anywhere. It needs to fit in nicely. We've got a head plate here that will, you know, as string tension is put on, the neck will flex forward, and you want it to be braced against the nut. You want to make sure that everything is fit, not tight, not loose, but fit. I've got a nice fit here. Fits well along the bottom. Everything's nice and square. Let's see if you can see that. Now, one issue, if you look at the binding, over the years, the binding shrinks. So there will always be a bit of a bold line on this side of the nut. Nothing I can do about that because the binding has shrunk that way, away from the nut. So, you know, I'm not going to remove fingerboard wood to bring that back. It's just one of those things you have to leave it there. Time to trim the sides and top of this. I'll be gluing it in. Again, I'll use hide glue this time since what was in there was glued in with hide glue. Normally I would use super glue. I've done thousands of nuts. I'm very comfortable with gluing the nut in first and slotting. I know enough to leave enough height so that I can adjust my slotting and not have to ruin the nut. But I also want to start getting the touch-up built up on the sides as well, so I'm going to be gluing this in right off the bat. In other videos you may have seen, like I'll do airbrush and I'll mix my own aged lacquer to do with that when I need a larger quantity, but just a little touch-up on the sides is what I'm doing now, so I'm just going to use one of these lacquer pens that comes pre-mixed. Instead of brushing it on, which I sometimes do, I'm just doing the sides right now, and then I'm going to start slotting. Then later on I'll go over the whole thing again. So I'm going to get some of this out of the pen and use a fine brush to put it on the sides. So just get a little out here. So I've mounted the guitar in my neck jig, And what I'm going to go through now is underneath the neck there are various dials and support beams that will I can adjust to hold the neck in place for when I take the strings off. Once I have all those adjusted correctly, then it's time to get them all off. I'll put a protective cover over the body, because you should always do that. If you can take the neck off a Stratocaster or something, put it on a dummy body, don't worry about it. Don't want to ding this body at all. So I'll get this all adjusted with the strings on, and then it'll be held in place as if it's under tension. Then I do the leveling of the frets to get the most accurate fret level you can. You want to make sure that you're doing this according to your straight edge and your radius gauge. A lot of people will skip the radius gauge, and when you're done you end up with, usually the ends of the frets are rounded down too much. So when you go to set it up and you set it up to, you slot this to match a 10-inch radius, well then your E strings are actually, the frets sloping off, so you haven't really perfected your setup or your fret dress. So you need to follow the gauges very well and make sure that everything's leveled out perfectly both this way and your radius. So these are what the neck supports look like. I've got this angled just so I can show up on the camera. Normally I'd have to, I wouldn't be able to get to show this to you properly. So they're over here just out of view. I'm going to have an adjustable foot that will help hold the peg head up in place. There is a counter strap. A lot of people don't understand that neck doesn't just flex uniformly. With the nut, some necks, the wood will actually kind of, imagine like it pivots in here more than the rest of the neck flexing. And you're able to tell that with these dials. So what I'm going to do is, I've adjusted it before with the notch straight edge, have everything done upright. I'm going to adjust these to 0. Then I'm going to get these support posts in place, not pressing on the neck. Keep an eye on the dials that you're not changing anything. And get everything set up with the strap, and when I get the strings off and everything, these dials should still be at 0. That means that as the neck is in place right now, I will be holding it, or the jig will be holding it in the exact same manner, even with the same amount of tension, the counter tension of this strap and the strings in the nut. That will all be the same, so I get an absolutely perfect fret level. Here we go, we're all set up, everything's zeroed out, ready to go. So now it's time to get the leveling done. I've established alignment of the E strings. I've done the math to get an equal spacing. Just have to finish getting these started, and then I'll go back with my radius gauge to establish the depth. There you go. It's a real 1957 Goldtop, all new frets, new bridge, new nut. It is ready to go. It plays great. Instruments like this, you gotta do all the special considerations. Like, I'm not gonna just jump right to leveling that fingerboard. We discussed that earlier in the video. If this had a problem with the neck, then you go in and do things like that. I've done repairs on Les Pauls where the binding has cracked, and I've replaced the binding, put in nibs with the refret and everything. Not what the customer is looking for on this guitar. Maybe someday down the road it would be done on this guitar, but I'm able to get this up and playing great in its current state without doing any sort of drastic alteration to the guitar. So that's kind of the theme when you have something like this, is less is more, you know. So if you have any questions about this or any of the other projects in my library, you can just leave a comment, or have my contact information is in the About section on my channel, and we'll see you next time. Okay, see your treat? See your treat? It's under there. There you go. Good girl. See your treat? Hang on, it's there. Where'd it go? Good girl. See that? It's under there. Good girl. Do one more. Hey, look at this. It's under there. Nope, wrong one. It's that one.